And we're live for our first ever podcast. Welcome to Tac Visor, where we hit all the points and don't miss anything. I am SenileKing 13 on Twitch, as you can see below me. And this is my partner, Nick, Skitch 121 on Twitch, as you can see below him. What's up?
Oh, not much, man. Just ready to get this thing started. Super excited. It's been a lot of fun being able to go through and do some review, do some studying, and get some takeaways for the matches. All the roster movements, that's exciting stuff too. So it adds to the excitement and all the different intrigue. So yeah, I'm ready to get going. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I agree. It was a long time coming to do all this, and hopefully everything goes well and we can port everything over pretty well, which I think will go pretty easy. And yeah, there are lots of rosters moving around, especially with the Titans, and we'll get all to that. That's why I'm rocking the shirt, even though I'm jumping ship. If Haxel leaves, I'm gone.
I feel like we should take a second to get our biases out of the way then.
Okay, you're biased to New York, and I don't have a bias.
Right. So he's jumping ship from Vancouver. Probably still a little biased because it's not 1,000% official. It's all rumors, with the exception of Johnu and their coach. He's still wearing the shirt. I am impartial to NYXL, but I'm one of those fans, and so is Austin. He can speak to this too. We're the kind of fans where we're realistic. Sometimes we may sound unrealistic or sound thick-headed because it's our team or bias, but we're really realistic. So if we want to criticize something about it, we're going to be the first ones to do it. And that's kind of in our effort to make sure we remain unbiased and don't let those things feed into what our takeaways are, how we approach this. So those are those out the way so that we know. And I don't really think it matters who we're biased as far as players, because we pretty much love all the players with a few exceptions.
Yeah, players move around and all that. And I think one of the ones that you weren't a huge fan of is gone anyway, and we'll get to that also. But so let's start with our rundown. What's the first game you got for me?
All right, so just kicking it off, we're going to start with basically the one that kind of triggered the entire viewpoint for me on the weekend. Soul Charge.
Mm-hmm.
We'd seen the Dynasty come out in their first three matches, and they were just absolutely dominant. They were running match comps and just 1v1 across the board were better than all the teams they played against. I mean, and that included the Charge and the Hunters and the Spark. I mean, and those three teams have had adequate time now to get caught up with everybody else as far as matches played and kind of get back in the groove of playing Overwatch and having the chemistry build back up. But Soul just came out. It was their first three matches, whereas everybody else had played before them and just looked far and away the better team. And then we see them roll into Shanghai last week and just get the break speed off of them. I mean, They gave up Hanamura in under 2 minutes. And Hanamura, the second point, is one of the hardest in the game to cap full. And Shanghai made it look like it was nothing. Like it was.
Yeah, they double capped.
An impressive display to watch.
They double capped them really fast.
Double capped, and then just they bled out the Dynasty the rest of the way. And that, of course, the Shanghai bit will come to later, because that was like the headline takeaway, but not the first thing I wanted to talk about. So Soul Charge, it was one of those matches. You see it in all kinds of sports. You have that game that's coming up, should be against a pretty good team, a solid opponent, but you're more than capable of getting that bounce back win, getting back into a rhythm. And it just looked like with how they got beat by Shanghai, they're just reeling. And it's sad to see.
Yeah, I would have to agree as well. Soul, they didn't come out super. They're making mistakes that they're not normally making. Fitz on the Sombra coming out and missing 4 and 5 EMPs where he's not hitting Zen, and all of a sudden your EMP is completely wasted because Zen pops his ult. You can't get anything with your other DPS. Fitz has to get the hell out of there, so now all of a sudden it's a 5-on-6 and with an enemy ulting Zen. You're not getting a lot of value out of that EMP, and he wasn't charging his EMP faster than the Charge were. So he wasn't getting that EMP off very well. Um, it, and I think that Prophet, and I know we had spoken off camera a little bit about Prophet. I'm pretty disappointed in how Prophet's played so far. I think out of the whole league, unfortunately, he's had the biggest slump right now in the last two matches. I don't think he was completely outclassed on Echo, completely. I know it's a new hero, but we're seeing people like Deeding and some other heroes that are killing it on Echo and putting a lot of shield damage, and he just was not.
Yeah, he's definitely in. I'd say he's having the biggest lull right now of the active players. And honestly, I'd have to say it's in part because of Echo, but we didn't see very good play out of him against Shanghai last week. And Shanghai does have a tendency. They're kind of like NYXL and the Rain, and even now the Fusion, where their support line plays a little bit more up to the mid line, and they play a little more aggressive, going to assist with eliminations and dish out additional hero damage in order to rack up their ults quicker. Which for a player like Prophet should be like, you're just basically handing gimmies over. It should be like taking candy from a baby for him, because he is so good on the flank.
There were no picks.
There were no picks in that match. And we see him, rather than having his fellow DPS run the Echo, he runs the Echo, which kind of, fits. I mean, I know he's more of the flank type characters as well. So of course you want to defer to the one who's more flexible on the non-flanking characters, your hit scans and your splash damage and things. But when you have a match where you were that unable to capitalize on positioning that should have favored your play style, and then you don't take a match to try and make up for that or get back in that rhythm, and you just immediately switch to another hero that you're learning like everybody else, you lend yourself to having a bigger drop off than you would hope. And I think that kind of speaks into the decision making that he's been having issues with. I mean, if you look at the first point on Ilios, Sol had 75% taken and he had his ult. And rather than ulting to drive that 75 up towards 99, maybe even get it into that overtime tick of 99, you got to wonder, if he had popped that instead of sitting on it, would they have been able to take that point and then start to gain some momentum? Because as soon as he decided, nope, I'm going to save this and fall back, Charge took the point, he ulted late, and it was immediately eliminated. Immediately eliminated. I mean, he wasn't even Winston for, I don't even think, for 10 seconds.
Well, and there is a
Charge
disparity.
just eliminated it.
There is a disparity with the Echo players that are good with, especially with these tanks. I mean, these tanks and support ults. Briggs ult is huge for pushes, so Echoes are hitting those pretty hard. Winston, Reinhardt, you get those huge support and tank ults that have a long charge time, but all of a sudden with Echo, it's 5 seconds and you can get that ult. And I think when you're looking at the Echo players that are not good with those players, we're not good with those characters, especially when we're looking at someone like Prophet that has played mostly DPS. They're not getting the value out of the ult because they're selecting these big time ults from Winston. It's such a huge clearing ult, especially on that point. It's not a huge amount of space, especially with the hole in the middle, and he wasn't really doing his job. And you're going to see some of these players really struggle until they understand the mechanics of these tanks, and maybe they'll finally realize that playing tank is not as easy as everyone thinks it is. Creating space and all that is definitely one of the harder things to do in the game. And so let's go ahead and snowball into their game against Spark also, because I mean they got 3-0'd twice in the weekend. I mean that's got to be demoralizing, right?
And in their last 3 matches, they got 3-0'd because they did lose 3-0 to the Dragons.
Which,
now, one quick point
loss, I guess.
Well, true. But that's the thing that kind of started the catalyst and the snowball effect that we're seeing right now. And though another thing that I wanted to kind of take away real quick from the Charge match, because it feeds in for me to the Spark match, is the coaching decision to have creative play over Bedosin. Because with Bedosin, I mean, he's definitely the better I mean, not only because Creative's a rookie and it was his first match, but because Budosin has Anna in his back pocket. And I think now with Echo being in the mix and she can copy any alt, that gives an Ana one more target to be able to nano, which makes her all the more viable on the field, especially when you combine it with, say you manage to get two alts at the same time that are identical. So two Winston alts, prime example.
Or sleep and on the other team.
Or sleep on the other team. Say you get that mad combination, because you've got players who can do that. You can't tell me Jonak, Bedosin, or even Dogman, these guys who are high quality Ana players, you can't tell me that they can't get that setup for their team. So if you get that setup, Bedosin can give you that, and then you're looking at, just a new fear tactic to play against that team. They're just going to be sitting there going, man, he has this ability. But since they had him on the bench, not only did he not get to do the recovery bit that I was alluding to with Profit after that loss to Shanghai, they put him back in against the Spark, who were starting to pick up a little bit of momentum, and their synergy is starting to click a little bit more. And they didn't really do much change putting him in. They kind of ran the same style, same heroes, and it was just one of those things that you put yourself in a deficit and at a disadvantage because you've lost this chemistry and the synergy. All the momentum is out of the sails. You had no opportunity to recover, and Spark just capitalized on it. I mean, the fact that you have, their support is almost getting as many limbs as their DPS now, because there's no fear against a team like Seoul. They're able to push up, rotate to those flanks, and push up to the center. It's just, anytime that you have your support being able to feed like that for your DPS to get easier picks, if you're the opposing team, that's what you're allowing, you're setting yourself up for failure. And that's kind of snowballed out of that charge match.
I agree. I agree. We need to see Seoul come back a little bit stronger, especially in the upcoming weeks, and really see what they can do. They're a good team and they have good pieces. Obviously, we've seen them have success and win games that I personally didn't think that they were going to pull off. And they weren't having a terrible season until that Shanghai match. So I think that is really important for their team dynamic. They need to at least win some maps. You got to win some maps. The 3-0 is very disheartening. Talking about disheartening, Valiant Rain. So
Valiant Rain.
What a match, right? What a match.
It was a very good match.
Yeah, so Valiant coming out really strong. Rain trying to come back. I felt like it was a pretty two solid teams. I won't say elite teams. I don't think either one is elite, but I think they're two solid middle of the pack teams right now, especially, that really fought it out until the end. And it wasn't really until that fifth match that I think the Valiant kind of took over on the fifth match and that fifth map, and and that was fine. But Valiant just they can really ride on KSP. KSP's Ashe, especially with Widowmaker being out, and all of a sudden, even with Echo, it's another target that's just floating around. KSP can just click the crap out of some heads, and we've seen him do it all year. And obviously, I think he's gonna end up being the Rookie of the Year, at least in my opinion, should be. So without KSP doing what he did, I don't see them winning the game. What do you think that Rain can do to improve on this for next week?
Honestly, as far as Rain is concerned, I do think that coming out of last season, they were among the elite teams. For me, coming out of last season, top 5 teams, you could argue who was 1 and 2 between Vancouver, San Fran. Then it was New York, Shanghai, Atlanta for me. And Atlanta started off the season looking like that number 5 team. I think and they're kind of I had this listed after the Justice match because the Fuel match was one that I was kind of really wanting to evaluate. But it's a good thing I watched them back to back, because Atlanta's having an identity crisis, which is kind of the same thing as the Justice. Mm-hmm. Like they keep making these oddball substitutions, like FDR for Hawk, when we've seen Hawk and Pokepo have such good synergy. Is anybody over that fire strike through the damage matrix?
Oh my
Or
goodness, where they basically got a team kill.
I mean, it was a full
and it was an
it was a
Arisa pull that pulled them all together. It was
it was a
team
halt
play.
damage matrix. It was so that's synergy. That's what Atlanta. It's what they're so capable of, and they sacrificed that, in my opinion, by putting in FTR as well as putting in Sharp for Baby Bay. I'm not quite sure what the decision on that was, because right now we're seeing a lot of hit scan, like Ash being paired with an Echo.
So I think that. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. Baby Bay. I think that McCree being out. I think that was why Baby Bay got subbed out. So we've seen Baby Bay play very, very well on McCree, and not too many others where he's playing at that high level. So I think that's why he got subbed out.
And that could be true, but what I was going to get to, my counter to now your point, is we saw Baby Bay outplay Carpe on Ash the week before.
It's fair.
Like the casters were favoring Carpe and saying, there's more value. There really wasn't. His teammates, his tank play especially, was really, really helping him to be able to make some plays. Whereas Baby Bay was utilizing his tank's positioning and going out on his own to get crucial picks to force deeper and deeper matches in each round of the maps. Yeah. And so for me, with Ash being right now the most predominant pick alongside Echo, for me, it would have made more sense to have him continue that momentum, especially against a Valiant team that, to me, is they're a very solid team that just continues to just get better. And now that they've shown that they have more depth than just KSP and KSF that apply as a solid Echo, and Shax is just popping off on the Reaper. Yeah. That 4-player depth, it should lend itself to continued improvement over the next few weeks. And that's something that I think the Reign needs to kind of get going for themselves. They need to, yes, these subs do need to happen at points, but at the sake of what? Do you want to, just because, Sharp is pretty good with Ash or pretty good with May, so we're going to put that with our Echo in Erster, whereas you could have Baby Bay running Ash and continue that synergy moving forward. Yeah. So are you just doing it based on your belief in your comp setup versus their comp setup and personnel versus personnel, or are you going to be more mindful of, we have to work on the synergy, because then the comp will take care of itself.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought up Shax too, because Shax, with that combo of KSP, I mean, Shax, he also ran the Tracer, and we've seen him do some work as Tracer, and he had one of the coolest picks in the whole match, which is a 180 basically alley-oop pulse bomb where he killed both himself and the enemy Tracer, which enemy Tracer did a good job, but he can do these skill shots, and I think they were trying to have fun with it.
And in a 1v1, in a Tracer 1v1 in a team fight, that's a sacrifice, a trade you can honestly make. Yeah. If you've got confidence in your, in this case, in your Echo, your other partner being able to, handle their own.
So let's move on to something a little less fair. Shock and Outlaws. Now, as a reformed Outlaws fan, I have 3 of their jerseys. It pains me to watch Dante being just so good on the Sombra, and I wanna let you in on some of these stats here that I found. Okay, Dante as Sombra per 10 minutes. Here's his stats this season right now. He is 2nd in hero damage, 8th in final blows, could be higher, but in his defense, his team doesn't kill a whole lot of people anyway. Enemies hacked, 1st. 30.5. 30 and a half hacks per 10 minutes. Hack assists, 10. That means that 1/3 of the people he is hacking die. 1/3. And that is 3rd in the league. Enemies EMP'd 2nd, fewest deaths 2nd. He's only dying 3 times every 10 minutes. Only dying 3 times while hacking 30 people. Those are crazy stats. Get this man on a team that wins. Get him on a team that wins. I'm tired of watching him try to carry this team. And a Sombra, they're not going to carry the team. A Sombra can win you 2 and 3 fights, with their EMP or a couple hacks. And I like that he stays on the front line. But you got to have tank play that's going to carry, and right now the Outlaws just don't have it.
No, and I don't want to say they don't have it because they do. I mean, I will always have faith in Mecco. I mean, the man has the most eliminations of any tank in the league, and this season he's second in eliminations behind only Carpe, and it's not by much. It's only by 9 eliminations.
Yeah.
And Mecco's always been, as we've seen with NYXL and even still with Houston, his positioning is phenomenal. Yes, it can be a little aggressive at times, but usually your off tank is going to be a little bit more aggressive because they can get so many picks quickly. That being said, we're seeing Mecco play more main tank now. We saw him heavily on the Sigma, which makes me kind of wonder, is that going to be their move going forward, is to have him be on the main tank role? And are they transitioning Muma out? Are they going to have Muma do something else as far as maybe he'll start running the off tank role? Yep. But I don't really want to blame it so much on the tank play as far as why Dante's being underutilized. For me, I think it's also, I mean, you and I have always been off camera, and including a few people that we talk with, critical of Raucus and his flex support play. And right now they're having an issue of who's going to run main. If they're running him with Raucus and Repel, if they're running those two together, who's your flex? And for me, I would say it should be Repel. And if it's going to be Repel, put Jexy in on the main support, because you can't have these crossing styles. You can't have these conflicting styles of play. You've basically got a guy who, for the majority of his career in Raucus, has played that flex support role for the Houston Outlaws, Zen mostly, and albeit lackluster, and now Anna, and albeit lackluster, he's made it work, because at one point the Houston Outlaws were one of the top 5 teams in the league. We just saw other teams come in. I mean, the majority of the first season, the only reason most people didn't put them in the top 5 first season was because when they would run into teams like London and NYXL, they just had no answer.
Yeah,
they could go up against the Philadelphias, and they could go up against, the LA teams. But when it came to those top 3 teams, the top 2 teams, they couldn't really do much. And they've never taken the time to get away from that as things have gotten worse. And now we're seeing, an issue with player management. And there are some compositions I think they should run player wise. I think they should be running hydration with Dante a little bit more, because I think they would complement each other better. You won't have, again, conflicting styles where they both play the same heroes or something like that. But I really don't know what the answer is for Houston. They've just got some things they've got to figure out as far as their composition and player roster, as far as who's starting and who's on the bench, who's being paired with who.
Agreed. So let's get on to your team, NYXL. Now, I want to start not with Shanghai. Shanghai was the match of the week, obviously. You've got the top, in my opinion, you've got the top 2 teams facing off. I think it was very clear on what that match was going to end up being. Now, I want to talk about the Hunters, because the Hunters tried to do some of what Shanghai did. And I think that it really shows you just how good Shanghai actually is when they're playing NYXL, because you have the team like the Hunters. People find success against NYXL when they dive Jonak. If you can pick Jonak first, I forget the stat. I had it before. When Jonak died first, NYXL was losing well over half of their team fights. So Shanghai did a really good job of pushing him off and getting to him first, but it was because their support and tanks were taking space, because they were taking space that isn't normally there, because NYXL obviously has 2 of the best tanks in the business right now. And I mean, we can talk about Mono. He's a monster. And I think that in the Hunters, I feel like he was almost upset at how the Shanghai match went. So they really tried to dive on Jonak, and you can't do that if you don't have the support like a team like Shanghai does.
Well, and I think the other thing too, and we've seen it in the past, especially like the early parts of the last season, we saw where it was like first season, that was not the case. Second season, we saw dive Jonak, NYXL starts to falter because of how valuable he is as far as his healing and his damage output, which is for a support still one of the best in the league. But what we saw was an adjustment. They started to watch their spacing a little bit tighter. We started to see them rotate him up into the midline and push the DPS into the back line so that they could really exaggerate preventing that flank and that rotation from the opposite DPS team. Opposite team DPS, however you want to word that. But my big thing was we're starting to see that adjustment take place again. We saw it against the Shanghai Dragons, and we really saw it in the Chengdu Hunters, which to me was a match that, along with the Shanghai match, because they kind of go hand in hand, why I still think, even though one was a loss against the Dragons, one was a win against the Hunters, NYXL to me is the second best team in the league because we saw them start to make mid-match adjustments, not only in how they were positioning and setting up, but in their hero composition. To me, experimenting right now with the hero composition as best you can, while there's going to be limitations right now, and there's going to be these bans that are going to be taking place all the way to the playoffs. When the playoffs come around, those are not going to be a thing.
Right.
So the fact that we're seeing Hotba playing Roadhog, helping DPS isolate more heroes, be able to dictate the points of attack, and basically make the job for Mono to establish a front a whole lot easier. Those kind of things are going to help make the positioning so that Jonak's not the first pick easier for NYXL to start being able to go, we lost Jonak, we can still win this fight because our positioning's solid and Anamo's picking up the rest of the slack. So it's kind of become an issue again. We saw it become a non-factor at like the midway point of last season, all the way through even to the playoffs. But now it's starting to rear its ugly head again. But they've been fortunate in, the individual plays of, again, Hotba, Mono, Sabiobi, who has had a resurgence and has reestablished himself as arguably the best tracer in the world. And he's starting to get up there as one of the better Reapers in the world.
Better Reapers.
Those better adjustments individually are going to lend itself to helping with the positional adjustments. And hopefully we'll see that number drop back down to where it was towards the end of last season, as far as if NYXL loses Jonak, what's their win fight percentage chances? I don't know. That's really all I can say about it. It's still one of those things that it tears me. It's like, we can win without him in fights. We should be able to. Every team should be able to win fights without one. But when you see teams like Philadelphia, who they can only win team fights if they pick one early, you're going to see that kind of effort be put in before team fight engagement begins. And so hopefully the NYXL can figure that out a little bit quicker.
And I think the Hunters wasted a lot of resources just trying, because they're not necessarily in a position where they're, an elite team. We don't think that the Hunters are an elite team. There's no question that they're run-of-the-mill team right now, and they've got some growing pains, and that's fine. But I think they wasted a lot of resources keeping someone on Echo. It's a new hero. Not everyone is like Rascal, where they can just pick up a hero and master them in 10 seconds.
In like 30 seconds.
Right. Rascal does everything. I don't know how he does it. He's a freak of nature.
Rascal is IQ of 5,000.
Yeah, can just do everything. So I think that they were using it as a test, especially against one of the better teams in the league. I would agree and say that they're the second best team.
Well, and one other thing, and it's kind of to feed both points on each team. Part of the reason why the Hunters, stayed on that Echo, the Hunters love to be experimental, and they love to be fast-paced experimental. They love to push and dictate the rate of engagement, and Echo kind of lends itself to that. But it's funny that we see them being so experimental, and if they ever like kind of stop that and figure out, no, this is our niche, let's just run it, and then this is our second niche based on the hero bands, our third, fourth, etc. If they figure that out, they might become one of the best teams in the league, because they have the individual talent and the determination to run these riskier comps, which is what you want to see in your better teams. But to that point, that's why NYXL is now so good, is because we're seeing them take what the Hunters like to do and do it better. Like the thing that makes the Hunters so scary is the experimentation and fast pace. We saw NYXL multiple times get experimental. Now against the Shanghai Dragons, they got experimental. They didn't didn't push the rate. They didn't try to slow things down. They didn't try to speed things up. They tried to keep it slower and pace things out, which just drove the matches to go longer, made it a more difficult reverse sweep for Shanghai.
Yeah.
But we saw them speed it up against the Hunters and give them a little taste of their own medicine, and the Hunters had no answer for it.
Yeah,
so
and we can talk about that Shanghai match too. Because there were a couple things that I thought happened during that Shanghai match. One, Mono made mistakes. And I don't mean he made mistakes like it was, bad positioning or anything like that. He looked human. Sometimes Mono doesn't. I mean, his positioning is perfect. His fire strikes are always on, especially, obviously when he's playing Reinhardt, which is what I like to see him play most. Now, he has started to play a little bit of Winston, I believe, in the match too. But he also, I know you brought up, I'm glad you brought up Hotba playing on Hog. So Mono was all of a sudden playing Orisa, and I know why they were doing that. The Orisa Hog I like. You get the halt, you get the pull, but they were missing their hooks, and they weren't really answering to Diding's Echo. Now, in their defense, Diding right now is the best Echo in the league. A very new hero. From what I saw and the team he was going against, he's played the best.
Okay. Now that you've made that point, I can see that. Because I was about to say, we just talked about Rascal.
I know, and Rascal played well. But the competition's not the same. When you're going against NYXL with a new hero, even, I still don't like that NYXL changed their tanks and that Mono, and Hotba were doing the Orisa Hog. I think maybe they were just trying to pull Diding out of the sky, which is exactly what he wants. He Echo has that escape potential and a lot of shield breaking abilities, especially because the sticky bombs, obviously that shield's an easy target. That beam does 50% or does bonus damage to anything lower than 50%. And I say anything, not
literally
just
anything.
Heroes. If a shield is under 50%, it's doing bonus damage.
It's going to melt it.
So it
has the Symmetra effect.
Exactly. So Symmetra's ramps up, and Echoes is as soon as it's 50% or less, it's doing bonus damage. And I mean, what could have NYXL done differently to counter that Echo play?
Honestly, that's a very interesting question to pose. Just because we saw them eliminate the Hunter's Echo the next day. And I think considering it's Jinmu on it, it was Jinmu, I believe, that was on the Echo. It was Jinmu. Yep. Jinmu is easily the best Pharah in the league. If it's not him, it's Diding. And we've seen them play Pharah so well that once they transition to Echo, who has a lot of similar mechanics, they should be just as successful. So why they weren't able to have that early plan on Diding and had to make an adjustment for Jinmu, I honestly don't know. And I don't really I kind of hang myself up on like you were doing is the tank play. I understand doing the halt hook, but for me, we saw the next day the Rhine Roadhog was working. I mean, you wouldn't think it would work because you like to have a more consistent damage output. That's why you see people run Diva with Reinhardt, is because of that consistent damage output that the off tank can give.
A lot easier to find that Sombra too.
Exactly. A Hog can give that damage output, but he's got to be a lot closer due to the shotgun mechanics of his weapon. And that's why he has the hook, is to draw him in and get that. So maybe if they had run that a little bit more and made the threat of higher damage block ability with basically punishing anybody who tries to get over aggressive in taking down that shield, if they had given that threat, maybe that would have forced the Echo to be back a little bit further, because we've seen a lot of these players when they play Roadhog pull off these ridiculous hooks out of the sky. And I have no doubt in my mind that Hoppa could do that, and that would have eliminated Diding if they had run a Reinhardt instead and not focus on getting a halt hook, but just forcing the point of attack, driving down the middle, and then letting Hoppa peek out onto the right or the left, wherever he was in the air, Diding, hook him, bring him down, get that early elimination, and then kind of keep the team fight going. Outside of that, I mean, really the only other thing I could think of is if you had Nene in there, if Nene were in there and running like an Ash or something like a lot of these other teams did,
Yeah.
I feel like he probably could have eliminated the echo play pretty easily because he's among one of the top hit scan players in the league. We just don't see it that often because right now we're seeing the flanking heroes and the splash damage heroes be the primary use in these metas, which is
Especially
why
with
you have
Widow and McCree being out this week.
exactly, which is why you have the Who Are Yous and the Sabiobis running these compositions instead of Nene or Libero.
I agree. All right. Last two that I wanted to talk about aren't really going to take a whole lot of time. Mayhem Uprising. Obviously, the Uprising got destroyed the last time they played Mayhem. The Mayhem set the Overwatch League record for quickest game. Ridiculous time. Now, it almost seemed like they were trying to do that again right from the start. The Boston they just look bad. They're not playing as a team, and I know that a lot of that goes on Fusions, but they have him playing dive. I mean, they were just playing so much dive, and I don't think you can put Fusions on a Winston and throw Brusen in there with him on a Diva and think that you're gonna beat a team like Mayhem. That it's just not gonna happen. So I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time on them just because it wasn't really a super interesting match. The Mayhem did exactly what I thought they were going to do, and the Uprising did exactly what I thought they were going to do as well.
Yeah. It's just sad. We've seen Boston fall so far. They've been that one team. Like a lot of people gave Shanghai flack for that first season, and then the couple early matches last season before they really clicked with Gamsu in the lineup. It's just Boston has been consistently bad. And when they've been good, it's been inconsistent. And we've seen Florida start to ascend, and they're starting to find their niche. I just don't think that they don't have the individual talent to put themselves up against the big boys like the MYXLs, the Shanghai Dragons, and San Francisco Shocks to win the 1v1s, which are going to be kind of important getting closer to the playoffs. But yeah, Boston's it's sad to see how bad they are. Fusions is one of those players I have on my list of players that need traded in order to get some good return to try and rebuild this team. The problem is we're talking about a franchise that's owned by Robert Kraft, who is running this like he ran the New England Patriots, and sometimes running a regular sports organization, running a esports organization the same way. Sometimes it works. Sure. Sometimes. But in this scenario with that type of blueprint or schematic, it just doesn't work. You have to have the best players, at least 2 players in your starting 6 that are among the top 10 or 15 in what they do, and they don't have that. Fusions is probably a top 15 tank, but usually he's only there if he should be. He's only really there though if he's playing a main tank like a Sigma or a Rhine. Right. It's kind of the same thing.
Don't think he's gonna get it done on Winston.
He's not. Winston's not his niche. Yeah. So,
and it's not like I said, and they had some silver linings. I thought Color Hex actually played an okay match, decent damage output. I was looking at some of his stats. Nothing too flashy, but he gets the job done, and he can get some picks and win you some fights. But when you don't have that support and you're not able to take space, it doesn't really matter what your DPS are doing. You can pick the enemy support all you want, but if you've already lost 3 people, you're not going to win those fights. No. Defiant Gladiators is our last match. What's your takeaways for that?
I mean, that was an interesting one for me because I coming into this season, Toronto and Dallas and Shanghai were the 3 teams that I felt were going to be the best 3 teams in the league, simply based on their roster. And so Toronto's kind of they've been the biggest enigma this season for me because when they've been good, and they've been scary good. But when they've been bad, it's been kind of almost ugly. I don't want to say it's not Boston Uprising ugly.
Sure.
It's not Shanghai season 1 ugly, but it's just it's you're watching it going, how are they playing this bad? They should be winning, but they're not.
Yeah, I mean
And I
right now
think a lot of that,
their map differential right now is 19 and 22 with
mhm,
4 wins and 6 losses. So when they
yeah,
win, they're keeping it fairly even on the losses, but they're
yeah,
losing those close games.
they are. And that's, I mean, I don't know what to point to on that. My biggest concern has been the inconsistency with who they're starting at DPS. Like they cannot every week. You don't know if it's going to be Logix or Surefour.
Yeah,
And considering Surefour has the most expansive hero pool of probably anybody in the league on his own, that he should be in your lineup at all times, in my personal opinion. Because now that you have a rotating meta and there's this hero ban, you never know who's going to be available week to week. You should have somebody who can play anything at any given moment so that you have ample amount of DPS counters in your back pocket and put yourself in the best position to win. And unfortunately, Logix is very one-dimensional. He does the hit scans. He's a McCree, a soldier, a widow, an Ash. He's very, very much one-dimensional. And you have somebody alongside him who's very experimental in what they do in in agilities, who can play a number of heroes himself, but still rather limited in what he can do. He's a lot of the flanking type, splash
yeah,
damage type. And you know, when you go so inconsistently with who you're starting, chemistry is a huge thing in any sport you play. And I feel like they have a better synergy and a better overall approach and confidence when they have Surefour in there. And I think that speaks to his leadership. Whereas when you put Logix in there, who's very young, he's fire from the hip type. He's almost kind of got that. I mean, I don't know about his personality, but in game, he seems like a Brett Favre type,
sure,
where he's
gunslinger.
very much a gunslinger, gets in there. He's just having fun, trying to do the best he can. But when it goes wrong, there's no getting him out of it.
Yeah.
And I think that you don't really have the luxury of having that right now. And you definitely can't run him and Surefour together because it just, that synergy doesn't really work. We've seen the Logix agilities work, but Surefour is definitely the better way to go. And I want to say that's all they really need in order to fix it, because that's their biggest question mark right now, because they just got an acquisition that I'm honestly a little excited about. Since they just lost Kellex, they went and got Cruz. Cruz, we saw do wonderful work last year with the Paris Eternal.
Yeah.
And I think that with a high quality DPS, or I'm sorry, support player like Kareev in there, who's in the top 5 in healing right now.
Yeah.
He's still one of the best supports in the league. You put somebody with Cruz's leadership and his knowledge of positioning and spacing, those are the big things for him, especially since he was a lot of Lucio in the Goats meta, especially. I think having him on that main support role is going to help shore up some things that they had some issues with Kellex, who was a little over aggressive for a main support. But those are my two big ones.
Well, and I completely agree. Obviously, I know we talked about with, Surefour, I think, is another one that's been a little bit disappointing. And it's not entirely his fault. Obviously, he's not starting every match. The teams he's being thrown in on, it's sometimes he's being forced to play with a comp that he's not always comfortable with, which, at a professional level, I think you need to be able to handle that. But when we saw him go from the Gladiators to Defiant, we've seen his stats drop to quite significantly, I might add. So he's dying quite a bit more, and I think that has to do with the positioning of the Defiance tanks and their support. And I do agree that the addition of Cruz is going to be really good for them. The healing output for him is pretty fantastic. So that might give Surefour a little bit more room to work with. When you know that you can be bailed out, you can be a little bit more aggressive, and that's what we see, unfortunately. I hate to bring up Vancouver, because I know we're about to talk about what's going on with them, but we saw Vancouver, especially last year, be very aggressive, and they could be because their supports were so good at bailing them out. And when you have someone like Haxel and a Doomfist can be very self-preserving. But when you know that you have someone to back you up or get that orb on you at the right time or save you with their ult or give you, that brig, a whiplash back to, whatever hog is trying to pull you back. So that match, it seemed a lot closer than the scoreboard would say, 1-3. It seemed a lot closer than that watching it. I thought that the Defiant, while they were obviously not the better team, I think that they still played okay. They played okay. They played better than they have been. Right now they're sitting at 4-6. Like I said, they're 15th in the league, but their map differential is only a -3. We've got a -1, -2, and a -6 above them. But
yeah,
those teams are 5-5 and 5-6, and they only have one more win, and then it drops off after that. But I would like to see them start to win some of those winnable games. This was a winnable game that good teams would win, and unfortunately, the Defiant, they're not showing me that they are a good team.
Well, and while that is true, it is very true that I think Toronto's capable of beating the Gladiators. Let's not sleep on the Gladiators. They are, right there, number 6. Granted, they're one game above 500, but one of those wins was against the San Francisco team that has continued to look more and more exposed and have some more issues. This was this past weekend, kind of their bounce back of like trying to show they're still that dominant team.
Mm-hmm.
But the Gladiators manhandled them in their first matchup and really still pushed them in the second matchup that they had, even though the San Francisco Shock won. So, I mean, if you're the Toronto Defiant, to me, this was maybe an opportunity. If anything, it would have been an opportunity to establish yourself as one of the, top 10 teams in the league and kind of be in that middle of the run and kind of be able to be on the outskirts of the playoffs. But we got to give the Gladiators credit that they just continued to play great. Bergering has shown to be a amazing acquisition for them from the London Spitfire, as well as space
more than just playing Widow.
Right, and showing that he has a far deeper roster hero pool than he got credit for when he was in London playing alongside Prophet.
Yep.
And let's not forget, Space came from the Valiant, kind of being unappreciated for his tank play, and he's still one of the better tanks in the league. His Sigma has especially it's catapulted him from one of the better ones to one of the best ones in the league, in my opinion.
I agree.
Because he's doing work. He's doing work.
I put down a note and I laughed to myself because I was like, man, he's really given Gladiators a lot of room. I was like, he's really creating a lot of, and I was like, oh, Space, he's creating a lot of space. Anyway.
And just kind of a side note, he is in the top 20, just on the outside of the top 15 in eliminations this year.
Yeah, and that's not what he's known for. He's known for making creating that space.
He's known for his damage block.
Yes, and really positioning himself in those positions. Mm-hmm. All right, so let's talk about a couple of the storylines that have gone over. Obviously there's been some huge news, and I just wanted to spend a little bit of time to talk about that. Not a ton, but a couple minutes here on Vancouver. So everyone's gone.
I will let you lead because I know your heart is broken.
Everyone's gone. It's not official yet.
Not official yet.
It's not official yet. I don't know what they're gonna do. I know, obviously, losing their head coach, and I think that they're already in the hunt for a new one, and it shouldn't be that hard to fill. I mean, I know there's gonna be plenty of people that want to fill an Overwatch League coaching position, but a head coach, particularly in the middle of the season, is pretty huge for any sport, let alone one where you are coaching on the fly. It's not like the NFL where your head coach leaves, and that sucks. That's awful, but you still have 2 coaches to back you up, a full staff. The players already know the playbook, all that. This is a little bit different because we've already seen some people leave, and with Janu leaving, and so I think that Haxville is next. You see a lot of these people have taken Vancouver out of their Twitter profiles, and I think it's a lot of mismanagement through there. And that's really all I wanted to say about that, because right now it's just a dumpster fire that we don't know a whole lot about yet. So that's, kind of breaking. But let's talk about Sinatraa. Yeah. I know he's your favorite guy.
Well, okay, first, before I jump back, I've been hard on Sinatraa here. Yeah. I like Sinatraa. I really do.
As a Valorant
he was one
player.
of those. No. as an Overwatch player, during the first season, he was one of those players that I was looking at going, man, he's just on an okay team and he's talented.
Yeah.
Like I'd never ever have I ever thought he was a top 5 player as far as a DPS player. Top 10, I could always give him. I felt like he was in that top 10, and that was in a year where you saw guys like Pine and Carpe and And even Jake, you saw these guys dominating like every
Jake.
week. You didn't know who you couldn't pick who was the best DPS player. Each week it was different. But to go back to Vancouver real quick, because I did have one thing I kind of wanted to say on that.
Yeah.
Primarily because I wanted to talk about Jonnu to Dallas because I think that's huge, but we've kind of touched on it a little bit, and my speculation of where Haxel and Ryu could go. But really, my big thing was I feel like the mismanagement has come from honestly one major move that happened in the offseason, and that was the release of Bumper. You have a team in the Vancouver Titans who spent the better part of 3 years together as a unit. These were your guys. This was your team. And they had the perfect synergy. They understood how each one played versus the other. And they had basically, despite what you want to say about San Francisco, Vancouver had perfected the Ghost meta before even coming over to the Overwatch League. Mm-hmm. They had it down pat. So much so that they had a tank player in Bumper who could be a little more aggressive in that composition.
Agreed. He's very aggressive.
You weren't seeing many tanks do that other than maybe Mono. And it was paying dividends when they would play. When you let that kind of person go, it speaks back to what I said about synergy and chemistry. You let that go, you just broke up. It'd be like taking Paul McCartney or John Lennon out of the Beatles and expecting the Beatles to keep playing. Like, no, you guys are going to stay together. John, you're going to go over here though. Sorry, we're going to go without you. It just wouldn't work. It would not work. And when you replace something like that with a player like Fissure, who, albeit talented, he's a toxic player. 4 teams in 2 years, that kind of tells its own story.
Poor Fissure, though.
and I was kind of hoping that maybe them adding Ryu Zhahong would, bring in enough leadership and positivity to counter whatever Fissure's issues are. But it's clearly not worked, and we've seen the team digress since as far as their issues with management. I think it all started there. You broke up the band. And yeah, you may have brought in at least one good player, but you brought in one who's a very divisive factor. And that's why I think there's this mass exodus about to happen with their entire roster.
He's extremely volatile, obviously. Yeah. And in his play and personality, I mean, especially, we talk about Bumper and being aggressive, and that's kind of why they released him, was because he was a little too aggressive, even for Vancouver's style, which was very aggressive. But then they bring in Fissure. Then you go and get
Fissure.
And so you're not really, there's not really any gain there. And so I agree with you on that.
Now, as far as Sinatraa, we'll go back to that real quick.
I don't want to talk about Sinatraa too much.
Right.
Because
we've still got to get to some things.
Sinatraa speaks for himself mostly. I mean, MVP, and obviously he's one of the better Zaryas, and then reformed over to a DPS player. So.
Mm-hmm. We saw him go from DPS to DPS playing tank back to DPS.
Yes.
And honestly, I think for the league, I don't think this is going to be that big of a deal, honestly, because of all the fresh talent that's come in that we've seen start popping off because they've been able to play DPS for so long now. Whereas for Sinatraa, he had the benefit of going and perfecting Zarya before anyone even had a chance to start learning the GOATS meta. And be like, look at Carpe. Carpe's, like him or love him or hate him, he's arguably one of the best DPSs, if not the best in the league. And we saw him struggle on Zarya. And he did get better as the season went, but by the time he got better with Zarya, the meta was gone. There was lock 2s, and then we saw everyone trying to scramble back and relearn their DPS. So I think his leaving is not going to hurt the league because we saw him perfect something, have an advantage because everyone else was behind at the switch. As far as DPS players, he got to play DPS on the side because he had already perfected Zarya, so he got to keep his skill set fresh. Mm-hmm. And now we've seen everyone catch up, and he's been reduced back to that, maybe top 15 DPS player, which and when it leads to you being benched, not subbed, not rotated out, there's a difference. He was benched.
Yes.
Because he saw no playing time for his poor play after they got whooped back-to-back matches by the LA teams. We saw him get benched alongside Super, and the rest is kind of history. We've seen him have to go to a different game that's possibly going to be a retreat for some of these Overwatch players who they might just be wanting a new challenge. Maybe they're burnt out, or maybe they just feel like they're being unappreciated and need a new platform. So I don't think it's going to be a mass exodus, though. I think Sinatra's just because he now, everyone's starting to see where he stands, whether they want to admit it or not. Because some of these analysts and our casters at the Overwatch League don't really want to admit it. I think that now that he's been reduced back to where he truly is, that's why we're seeing him leave.
Yeah, and there's not much I can argue with you there. I think that you're right on the nail with he already was a decent Zarya player and picks it up very quickly, which speaks to how good he is as a player.
It does.
But when we flip back and all of a sudden we're in the 2 lock, which I personally enjoy a lot more than GOATs. I think it was a good look for the league and we should just keep it moving on.
Absolutely.
His DPS play was still good. I mean, obviously we watched him play. I mean, me and you went to the finals against Vancouver, and he just straight up outplayed the entire team as Doomfist. Now, that did require more healing resources on him than any other character, any other player on any other team in any other match. It took that amount to get him out of trouble. And when he doesn't have that, when his team isn't that focused to keeping him alive because he's no longer the staple player, he doesn't have it. He's too aggressive. He gets out of position a lot. All of a sudden, your mistakes are a lot more highlighted. And I think he started to realize that. He's already gained a little bit of following on, his streaming platforms and, things like that with winning and being on Jimmy Fallon and all that, which was awesome. Definitely great for the league. And I didn't mind him being the face there with him and Architect, but which I think Architect outplayed him.
But he did, and we had the discussion on the way home from the finals that Architect should have been the MVP. That I thought so too. I feel like his Bastion play was more instrumental in them winning that finals. Yeah, and not just winning it, but Bastion dominating on the
chandelier.
I feel like that was the most unreal play I've seen. The only thing that comes close to that for me was
post fire strike.
Post fire. Yeah, that. But as far as overall, that Architect play for me stands out the way Profits, I think it was a quint kill on the last point of Volskaya in the finals the previous year.
As Pine's use
of as Tracer. Yeah. Pine's use of McCree's ultimate to reload twice in the same match.
No, not in the same, within 17 seconds.
Within 17 seconds. And then honestly, I put those along with I do have to give one other Sinatra's stage 2 finals Graviton Surge. How quickly he got that back based on his position, and those are the plays that stand out to me. But when you have a standout play, that means you should be somewhere up in the hierarchy. And if you did it on the finals, Architect had far more memorable plays than Sinatra, was far more instrumental at crucial points. And right behind Architect was Haxel for the Titans.
Yep.
So they never give the MVP to a guy who loses.
No.
So it should have been Architect.
And it's only happened. That's only happened one time in the NFL also, where a player on the other team won MVP while they lost. That was a defensive player. I can't remember his name. It was like Super Bowl 6. So it's been a long time.
Way back in the day.
And I want to talk really fast about KSP again, and in the Rookie of the Year debate. I don't know who else we would even really throw up there with you, because let me tell you about his play as Ashe, okay? And this is, even without the McCree that he's known for. So we're playing here as Ashe. Over 12,000 damage per 10 minutes. That is insane. 11.8 final blows. He's getting a final blow more than 1 a minute. Scoped critical hit kills, 13. 18 dynamite kills in the match. 20 eliminations, 19.9 per 10 minutes. He's getting an elim every 30 seconds. Every 30 seconds. And he's dying 4.4 times. So I think the deaths is a little higher than he normally is with the mobility of Ashe, just with the coach gun not being as mobile as he's used to. But it has to be a lock. I mean, especially now, if he's going to be able to keep using Ashe and people are just going to be flying around as Echo, I don't know what you do against that. I mean, how do you stop that?
I mean, honestly, you stop it the way that you stop a lot of different like dominating hit
Pray.
scan players. Yeah, there's a lot of prayer involved. But it's something that we saw a lot in the early parts of season 1, and then the later parts of season 2. And probably we'll see a resurgence of. I would like to think, probably a little bit more Zen. I mean, if you can get a Discord orb on a hit scan DPS, you're going to take them out of the equation real quick, because their first instinct is to try and run away, get that line of sight broken so that the orb goes back. And while they're in that defensive state of trying to retreat, that's the opportunity for your DPS, especially if you were to have someone like a Tracer or a Doomfist,
some type of flank.
Get that flank and cut them off on that retreat and eliminate them from the equation. Suddenly, not only do you have that out of the equation and you've eliminated somebody as talented as KSP, you've put yourself up a man in a team fight.
I agree.
And again, that we've seen a couple teams, they're living off of that, and if they don't have it, they die by it.
Easier said than done, obviously, because KSP's his positioning is very good, and he's getting that echo before the echo can get to him. And he had a headshot on Tracer. I didn't even see the Tracer on the screen until after she was already ragdolled. I mean, he just can click heads like crazy, and as Ash with that one shot on Tracer, that's just crazy.
Absolutely. I mean, there were a couple of others that I thought.
Yeah.
And now that I look at the stats again, because the stats have updated since I was making my list, for me, it's far and away KSP. But if anyone's going to challenge it, I think honestly Doha probably has the best chance of that, especially with the acquisition of Janu coming in, because a lot of your DPS they need two things. They need a strong support line, and they need a good off tank. You know, one who can play a good diva, especially. You'll see them. How many times have we seen that scenario where a diva's leading the way, eating up stuff being fired at the DPS, and then they just go in and clean house?
Diva's been very important. You
put Janu on diva and let him run alongside Doha, who's going to be running the Doomfist, the Reaper. I mean, even though we have been seeing Decay play more Reaper than Doha, if you put him on that, or even on a Mei, Doha is going
Mei
to
is very
like there's a there's a reason that the casters are high on him, and I see it too. And even when watching him in contenders, you can see it. The highlights speak for themselves. Yeah. But right now, KSP just has it on lock, because the man is a human highlight reel. He's in the top 5 in every major category a DPS player should be in, and it's beautiful to watch.
All right. I agree. All right, to end the show. Every week we will do our rundown of the next week's matches, and since we do such a high-level analysis of the matches, we won't analyze the matches upcoming, but we will give our predictions and what's going to happen, and maybe just a sentence or two why we think that, but generally just moving them on. And then we'll keep track, and at the end of the year, we'll see who has the most wins between me and you. Right. And we might even be able to get our whiskey corner in on it too. All right, so let me start here with Shanghai Seoul. They play first on Saturday, May 4th, or May 9th, sorry. But it's at 4 a.m. 4 a.m. our time, Eastern Standard Time.
These early morning matches. They're ridiculous. I do have Shanghai winning this, but I'm going to say 3-2. And that's simply because I still believe in Seoul. They are reeling, but I still think that they are one of the better teams in the league. They just need to not make panic changes. They need to make sure that they run with the same group. So I think we'll see an identical lineup from last week. Hopefully Fitz will be off the Sombra, though, because they couldn't utilize it properly. And they'll go to something more complementary to the Echo if Echo is, in fact, still in play. Yeah. So I think they'll close the gap, but I still think Shanghai is going to win.
Okay. Shanghai wins 3-0. Moving on.
Oh, geez.
Hunters, London.
No faith.
Hunters, London.
This one's interesting. We haven't seen London in a minute.
What happened to one sentence? We haven't seen London in a minute, but they are still 3-2.
That was going to be my one sentence, because I was going to say I'm actually going to take London 3-1, I would say.
I'm going to take London 3-1 as well.
Okay.
NYXL Charge.
3-0.
I think that's wrong.
No, I think it'll be the same as we saw. I think it'll be 3-1 again.
Okay.
No, the last time they played Charge, it was 3-0, I think.
It was 3-0.
So I think it will be 3-1 this time.
I'm going to say 3-0.
So, New York, obviously.
Yeah. New York, 3-0. Gladiators, Paris.
I am probably most excited for this match.
Me too.
I'm going to take Paris 3-2.
I think the Gladiators are going to win 3-1. I think that they've had a really strong showing. They've got a little bit of momentum coming on, but I would not be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if Paris ended up pulling that one off. I think they have the potential, but Gladiators 3-1. Washington, Vancouver. This is a tough one because who knows? I mean, these teams.
We don't even know who's playing for Vancouver.
Exactly, and it's not like Washington is good. So I still think, even given what's going on with Vancouver, I think they win 3-1.
I'm going to actually go 3-1 Washington because I think the disarray is going to put Vancouver at a disadvantage. To watch.
I guess we'll have to update. I say that with the current team they have.
Right.
So they might be, moving around some places, some pieces that might change that.
Yeah.
My personal game of the week is Houston Reign. And I think that Houston is going to get their win 3-2.
I'm actually going to take Atlanta 3-1. I think we'll see Baby Bay back, and we'll see Hawk back in the lineup, and we'll see better synergy.
Okay. Valiant Boston 3-0 Valiant. I don't think Boston's even going to take a map.
3-0 Valiant for sure.
Shanghai Spark. I can very easily see Shanghai 3-0ing them, but I think Spark will take a map.
I actually, because these teams have played so closely before, I'm going to take Shanghai 3-2.
Okay.
I don't think Shanghai's going to have an easy weekend. I think it's going to be hard fought.
Yeah, I think that they've got two games that could really go either way with Seoul and Spark coming up. Mm-hmm. All right. London and Charge.
I'm gonna take the Charge in this one, 3-1.
Okay. I am not, because I am not too thrilled with how the Charge have been playing. Although we haven't seen London, and I don't think that they're one of the elite teams, even though they're technically 5 right now. I don't agree with that, but I still think that London is going to pull it off in map 5. Okay. Philly Dallas, which I believe is your game of the week.
It's honestly, it's either that or the one we mentioned earlier between Paris and LA. They're probably 1A, 1B. I am going to take Dallas, and I'm going to take them 3-2. I would even say there's a draw map in there and one that goes the distance with like a 6-5, like we saw between Toronto and Philly.
If you nail that right on the bat, I'll give you an extra point in your win column.
Dude, that'd be amazing. I should get like an extra 5 points for that. Shoot.
No. 1 point.
I'm getting really specific here.
1 point. I think Philly wipes them.
Really?
This is my bold take because I don't think a lot of people would think this. Dallas is obviously, I mean, they're 4-4, but they've been playing a lot better and with the new acquisition and everything. But I think
5-1 in their last 6 matches.
Just plays them. I think it's 3-0 Philly. Maybe they throw in, a draw. I don't think so. I think that Philly has benefited from an easier schedule, but we've seen them dominate the teams that they should be dominating, and so I think that they win 3-0. Shock in Toronto.
This is going to be an interesting one. I would probably have to take San Fran 3-1.
That's
although I could not see it be I could easily see it going the opposite way though if Toronto plays the right way.
Yeah, I agree. I just don't think that they're going to. I believe that the Shock are gonna roll over 3-1 also. I don't think that they're gonna drop to Toronto, and even I think giving them 1 is pretty generous. I don't think that they're not gonna be able to match up. Vancouver, Florida. Here's another one where obviously we don't know. I actually am going to take Florida 3-0.
I was going to take Florida, but 3-2.
Okay. You think it's going to be a lot closer?
Just because I think by then Vancouver, we will have seen what they look like for a day. And if they've got the same team, that same team can definitely get 2 maps on Florida, I think. But I'm putting a lot of emphasis on that loss of Jonnu. I think it's going to cost Vancouver this weekend.
Okay. All right. Let's finish up here with our top 5 power rankings. So
Okay.
who right now do you think is 5-1? Who's your top 5 teams?
So 5-1, I actually had a 3-way tie at 5 because I couldn't really decide
Well,
between.
that's against the rules.
I know, but I couldn't decide between a couple of teams. But that was also before this weekend. If I were to
Sure.
look at it now, I'd have to say that my number 5 would be the LA Gladiators. I think that they are climbing up the ranks. They're getting better quality wins. We're seeing their play just continue to get better, and it's really fun to see. I put Dallas at 4. I know I may be higher on Dallas than most people, but I think they are a better team than people give them credit for. And again, they are now 5-1 in their last 6 matches. That's huge. And again, that one, they could easily be 7-0 in their last, and they don't have the standings updated, I don't think. But they could easily have just been on the longest win streak that we've seen in a while.
Yeah.
They started off 0-3, and then they just started to click. And you add in Jonnu to that, I think that's going to go a long way. I'm high on them, and we'll see where it goes. 3, I'm actually taking the Paris Eternal. We've seen Paris be very, very good at just making you grind out for wins. They've pushed Philadelphia to 3-2 all 3 matches and could easily be 3-0 against them because they made the quickest adjustment to Philly's style of going, we're going to get one early pick before we engage because we can't go 6v6. We have to go 6v5. And we saw them make the quickest adjustment and force them to 5 maps every time. And just a couple of decisions that were made by a couple players, you're talking about a swing of 1-2 to 3-0, in my opinion.
I should mute you for that pick. Carry on.
2, I've got NYXL.
Okay. So pretty self-explanatory, I think there.
We've already touched on that. And then, of course, Shanghai, which we have beat to death. I know no Philadelphia in my top 5, but I am not a fan of what I keep seeing, especially if they can't start engaging in more 6v6 and asserting their dominance and just winning those fights, grinding them out. If they have to continue to wait for guys to come out of spawn and pick off the trailer, who's just the slowest character, if that's how they have to keep winning, they're gonna get bounced in the first round of the playoffs. We saw it; it's not sustainable. And even if they can, we saw Vancouver that played a very similar way for the latter part of last season, and it ended up costing them in the finals because we saw them not be able to get early picks against Sampran, and Sampran grinded out fights far longer.
Yeah,
so that's why I'm not high on Philly. That's why I don't have them in my top 5.
So I think you had a couple bold choices in there. So here's my top 5. I think 5 right now is Reign. Okay. I think that they are up and coming. I think they've lost a couple very close games. They could very easily be 6-2 and one of the better teams right now. Be tied with the Shock with that. But I think they could have pulled those out. So I have them at number 5. Number 4, I actually have the Gladiators. I don't like Dallas being up that high. I think the Gladiators are a much better team, and I think the Reign is going to end up finishing higher than Dallas is. But the Gladiators have really, really come together over the last a week or so, and I think that they're playing very well. I actually do at 3 have Philadelphia.
Okay.
I think that regardless of who they're playing, what they're doing, their map differential is very much in their favor. They're winning well over 75% of their maps. So I think that they're a plus 19, I believe, before this weekend in map differential, because I don't believe that these are quite updated yet, maybe. But I think they're still getting the wins that they should. And they're not losing to teams like that they shouldn't be, such as watching NYXL lose that in a reverse sweep fashion. Not that they shouldn't have lost that map, but it's not happening to them.
That's almost apples to oranges there.
But it's not happening to them. They're not getting reverse swept by teams. When they're on top, they're winning.
They got reverse swept by Paris.
One loss.
Paris's win.
And maybe that one loss, yes.
And they were, let's not forget, they almost got reverse swept by the Houston Outlaws too.
Almost, and maybe they shouldn't have. And
they shouldn't have.
Bad, but I still have them at number 3. Number 2, I think, is NYXL. And I think that even had they beaten Shanghai, Had it been a 3-0, maybe it would have been a different story. I still would have had them at 2 if it was anything other than a 3-0, because I just think Shanghai is that much better, especially with Echo being released and Ding really, really carrying that team. So Shanghai is my, they're going to round up my top 5.
Yeah.
They just seem damn near unbeatable, and I know they have a loss, but they're really clicking right now, and I'm looking forward to seeing them
and
play their lights out.
They arguably have the deepest roster in the league. We haven't even seen Gaguri play yet in their tank lineup.
Right.
We haven't seen it. They haven't needed her, and we've seen every DPS player come in and play various characters and play just as good as the other.
Yep.
I mean, they've even won matches without DM and the Ding as the standard pair. They're playing some great Overwatch right now, and it's making things a lot of fun.
I agree. All right, buddy. This was great.
We did it.
First
one's out of the books.
We got through it. Close it up.
Got through it.
First one's through.
Tie it in a nice little bow.
So, if you're listening to this, first off, thank you. Secondly, how did you find me? We have no followers. 2 or 3. Come back. We will be here every week to break down all of the Overwatch matches, and they're all going to be pretty similar rundown to this. We'll start with the past week's matches and break them down with a pretty thorough analysis. I think that with the catch-up matches, we're going to have a lot more, so the episodes might end up being a little bit longer at the beginning here, but we're going to try to keep them right around what your commute is, about 45 minutes if you go there and back. So I think that's what we're going to try to stick to. So we'll do that. We'll talk a little bit about the storylines and players themselves. This week we just happen to have quite a bit going on in movement with players and things.
Gotta make up for lost time.
Yeah, make up for lost time. So we have quite a lot of matches. I'm going to keep tabs, and we'll see who is predicting better. And we're just going to go with mainly the wins and the losses and see where our maps were off on wins and losses too. So we're going to have our own map differential.
Yep.
And we'll see. And then we'll close by giving our rundown for the next week's matches. And again, with them having quite a few matches, we'll see what happens. But it's going to be a lot of fun. And you can stick around. Comments below. And you can follow us on Twitch, which I said are right below us and over that way. We go live quite a bit and play Overwatch in a bunch of different games, but you can come hang out and say and tell us whether we're right or whether you think we're dead wrong and explain why. Obviously, we're open to hearing your guys' suggestions. You can leave them in the comments below or send it to the email, which is tacvisorpod@gmail.com, and we'll read those. And if we get enough, we'll have a little segment where we go through viewer questions and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Until then, about enough of that. Anything to close?
No, just thanks for tuning in. And like he said, if you got some thoughts you want to share with us, hit us up and follow us on Twitch. We're streaming all the time. We have Wednesday family night Overwatch. It's the two of us and Whiskey, my brother. He joins us, and we just get into some mayhem. So come check it out.
One of us is a plat player. I'll let you guys decide who that is.
You know
Pick me up Overwatch League. I can play tank.
You know how much fun it is to hear so many people just place so much value on rating system that's broken.
Dude, it's so broken. That's what I would say if I wasn't a platinum player too. All right, we'll see you guys next week, and as always, it's a great week for video games.
Wonderful week.